Welcome back. We are today going to talk about how to prompt well whenever we're using generative AI or large language models. So the objective is to learn at least one research-based framework for how to prompt them effectively. And I also want you to have a particular mindset when you're entering into prompting and interacting with large language models. So please, like always, get out your pen, pencil, paper, or your tablet and handwrite some notes as you watch along. And the major questions I'd like you to think about and answer throughout the video are, what are the components of a good and useful prompt? How should I respond to a large language model output? And what ingredients go into a successful and strong and effective interaction with large language models? Okay, so let's begin where we left off last time. Students who use LLMs the most effectively have the following things. They have strong language proficiency. So the more you can learn to write well and expand your vocabulary, the better results you're going to get out of large language models. So keep practicing that. This class is a good way to do that. Being in school in general is great because you're reading a lot, you're talking a lot, you are writing a lot. If you have stronger academic credentials, you are going to do better using large language models. So again, keep struggling to learn harder and harder things, and you are going to be better equipped to interface with this tool. And then again, remember that concept of epistemic skepticism. Your beliefs, what you see, before you allow it to become your belief, you must be skeptical of it. So first you have to doubt it, and then you need to take additional steps, whether that's like thinking through it in your mind, or looking up additional information. And so what I'm asking you to do is kind of go into the exchange with large language models with a combative stance. You're like, I don't know if I'm going to believe this. I'm gonna be kind of tough and defensive before I take what they say as reasonable or good. So when people, I give some workshops about how to prompt LLMs, and someone was like, how do I prompt good? And my response to them is, asking how to prompt well is kind of like asking, how do I write well? It's a very complex topic. There are a lot of things that go into it. It really depends on what your aim is, what you want out of the LLM interaction. It depends on who your audience is. It depends on, the format. It depends on so much. So I'm not going to tell you everything there is to know about prompting. That would be insane. What I'm going to focus on is a researcher named Murray and her 2025 article, A Guide to Introducing Prompt Engineering in University Courses. There are a zillion other frameworks, and this is an evolving topic. But here's what Murray has to say. She says that there are 6 possible components of a very strong prompt for prompt engineering. And she says at its most basic, every prompt needs a task. So that's like, what is the major thing you want the response to include? It might be something like write this or generate this, or it might be a specific question that you're asking. You can also include context, and this is really important. You want to give the large language model as much information about the specific thing that you want it to do as possible. So you might say that it's for a particular level of information, or that you have information that you want to give it to give your output even more specific responses. You can also take on a persona. So you can tell them exactly who you are so that it can kind of tailor its responses with the language and the level of detail that you might really want. If you're asking it to help you study for some sort of photosynthesis test, and you're just asking it in general about photosynthesis, it might give you way too much complex responses. But if you tell it exactly what level you are, what kinds of parameters, what do you need specifically out of this, who are you, what would benefit you the most, it's going to do better at responding at the level that you can understand. You also might want to give it a specific format. How do you want the LLM to deliver the response that it gives to you? Do you want it to be in a table? Do you want it to be in a specific document? Whatever you want, you can ask it. Also, a tone, you might give it a specific tone, and we'll kind of maybe play with some of this. That can be, if you prompt it for a tone, it goes a little overboard, but it can be helpful. And then an exemplar is hugely great. That's when you say, here is an example of exactly what I'm looking for, and you hand it over, and then the LLM is better able to give you relevant information. So Murray shows us that at every single interaction you have with an LLM, you actually must have a task. That's not exactly true. This is for if you're actually trying to get something good out of the LLM. You could just go to the LLM and type blah, 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 and it will respond in some way. But a good prompt is going to definitely have at least a query, a question, a command, something that it's asking the LLM to do. And then she suggests that the most important thing is that you give it as much context as possible, and that you say specifically, here are examples of what I am looking for. And then a persona. Here's who I am, so that you can it can narrow down who exactly it's talking to. The other things are quote unquote nice to have, but not actually terribly important depending on your task. So I wanted to also mention a study done by Urban et al. In 2025, and it looked at a task that required students to make a very creative output. So they said, okay, imagine that you're working for Mattel and you need to sell a new version of a stuffed bunny. And that version should be interesting and unique and incorporate technology in some way, but it should also make a lot of money. And they allowed the participants in the study to use generative AI as much as they'd like. And they found some interesting things. They showed that participants had the best responses, made the best prototypes, if they used AI in a dialogic way, which means that they went back and forth. They didn't just ask for an answer, get the answer, and move on. In fact, they had conversations with it, pushed it further. The low performers, the people who did the least creative output, literally just used ChatGPT or LLMs like Google, said, hey, give me this information, and then they moved on. The strength of generative AI is in the dialogue you can have with it. So you want to keep that in mind. This means that you usually will need to give it a lot of detail. You need to give it background and context about the topic at hand. Tell all the information that's available to you so that it can really shape its responses to fit your needs and to be extremely creative. You want to say, I'm looking for extremely unique kind of connections. So tell it that you want extremely unique. Don't just say, what are some connections? You can tell it exactly the adjective you're looking for. Adjective, again, is just a word that says what the thing is like. So a dress is a noun, and a dress can be red. And a dress can be long. A dress can be short. A dress can be weird. A dress can be classic. And so you use an adjective that describes exactly what you want the output to be, and it makes the output actually closer to that. Then once you get that response from the LLM, maybe you read it and you say, that's not exactly what I was after. I want more of this. And you continue having a dialogue with the large language model to refine and get closer and closer to what your wildest imaginations might be. So you want to use more words than you think. You need to be more specific than you think, and you need to go back and forth more than you think with these large language models to actually use them well. So, what should you do to best prompt? You have to have that skepticism. You need to not believe, even if the output it says seems correct or seems pretty creative. I want you to imagine that before you get really good stuff, you should push it further, and you need to have more communication with it. So the best prompt is one that starts with a ton of your ideas. I don't want you to be afraid to write a long prompt. I want your prompts to not be 1 or 2 or 3 words, not one sentence. I need your prompts to be detailed, and I need your prompts to demonstrate to me that you come to this interaction with LLMs with a lot of information and that you can give them what you want so that you are having a partnership with the large language model and it's not just it giving you random stuff. Also, you want to tell that LLM exactly what you're looking for. So you should never say, write me an introduction. Boring. That doesn't give it any information about what kind of introduction you want or what ideas you already have. I want you to say, I'm writing introductions that need these kinds of things. We've talked about what a good introduction has, and it has these kinds of things. And then here are my ideas, because this is your work. You want to use this to help you generate extra human creativity and to push you further. You don't want it to do the work for you. You want it to actually enhance you and to be therefore mostly your creation and some additions based off of what LLMs might give you that you didn't have before. So let's talk about an example of a creative writing kind of prompt if you're doing revision for a creative writing assignment. I'm a college student who has written a draft or a short story for a young adult readers, and I'm polishing it before I publish it on my personal website. So here you are, you've given it a persona. It's about 2 mutant teenagers who are the only ones at their school who have special powers. They don't actually get along, but they are alienated from the larger student body because of their difference. They have to learn to be friends. So you've given it context, and you're also going to give it the draft. So that's a lot of context. You've given it a lot of information. They have to learn to be friends. Okay, sorry. I want to make sure that it is actually interesting and engaging to an audience of middle schoolers who are nerdy and outcasts. So that's giving it even more context and also giving it a little bit more of a persona. It says, here's who I am, here's who my audience is. The writing that does this best, so maybe you give it an example. You say, here's a person whose work I really admire. You might also say, I want you to keep my personal voice. We're going to talk a lot more about voice soon. So that's an exemplar. And then your task is read the draft and tell me where I'm best reaching my audience and tell me what parts I need to improve in order to best engage this audience, right? So you're not asking it to give you a new draft. You're asking it to use its extra human capabilities to enhance what you've already done. This is a fantastic prompt. I mean, I wrote it. What am I going to say? What to do with the output. So here's the thing. The output is often wrong. Long. But wrong too. Wrong can describe it. You want to read through it and get a sense of how it is organized. So you want to read the options and flag the ones that make most sense about how you feel or think or believe about a topic. So you're not just going to take whatever it gives you, because it might be wrong or it might not accord with who you are and be exactly how you feel. I want you always to respond at least 2 times to the LLM in a way that pushes it to do something else or take the ideas and make them even more specific to you. So for example, if I do what you said here and add a section about werewolves, it seems like the readers would get taken out of the specific experience of this world. How can I get the same effect of adding a section to develop this without using werewolves? So maybe it gave you the idea that you needed to add a section, but then it created some other problems. So you see what I'm saying? You're thinking critically about what it is, and you're having a dialogue to enhance your own work rather than to just accept what a machine told you. B, what you said about the possibility of taking away the scene in the cafeteria makes sense, but it creates a problem. It means I no longer have a place to introduce the character of the teacher. What options do I have for introducing this character in other scenes? So again, you're skeptical. You're like, okay, I see what you did, but I'm not just going to do that. And maybe in your conversation, the dialogue helps you think of many different options or opportunities. So it's kind of not just that it's giving these extra human ideas, it's that it's pushing you to actually think more deeply and to consider all the possibilities. So in my class, I will actually grade the way that you prompt large language models because I believe that this is an evolving skill that you need to have as you work in the world and as you continue to be a student, because research shows us that students are using LLMs. So I'm going to grade your prompts based on a rubric. And I'm going to grade how you respond to the large language model. So not only am I going to look at what you actually said to it, but I'm going to say, did you talk back to it and how? Past classes, literally last semester, it shows me that when your prompts are not specific, when they're short, when they're kind of lame and don't tell me much about what's happening inside your head, the literal corresponding work that I see in your essay is weaker. And I'm not making that up. Like, I didn't know. I thought maybe I wouldn't see a difference, but when I actually did this in my last class, it was very clear to me that people who prompt poorly do worse on their essays. And I'm allowing you to use LLMs. I'm not even banning it. I'm saying it needs to at least still be good. It needs to also still be you. You need to have done work for this to be any good. So you can get a lot out of this tool if you use it well, but it will make you stupider if you use it poorly. Like, you're gonna get left behind. A smart, strong user of Gen AI will quickly outpace an uncritical user of the tool. So if it's like 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, wow, I guess I should just use ChatGPT to do my homework, you may as well just not do your homework. It's not worth it. Take the L, or don't turn it in, or whatever, and maybe turn it in late, because you're literally making yourself stupider by doing that. If, however, you have done a lot of the work and then you get LLMs to help you out, awesome. Why not? Why not make use of all the tools available to you? So that's enough preaching for the day, and I hope you learned something about how to prompt effectively.